Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wandering Podcast, where we take advisement from outside the box. I'm Rihanna Ritter, your host. I'm an intuitive, sexuality, and authentic expression coach. Are you an accomplished professional who plays the part of having it all figured out? Who's strong for everyone else, but feels lonely, misunderstood, like you can't tell anybody the truth about how stressed you are, how not passionate you are about your life and all that you've created? I guide my clients to deep, lasting fulfillment. I re-engage them with their bodies, their pleasure, their desire. I help them align to enjoy fulfillment and prosperity in all areas of their lives.
Today, my guest is Dr. Rob Leone. He's a dynamic professor of human resource development at Idaho State University and the co-founder of Black River Performance Management, where the motto is work should fuel your spirit, not drain it. With over 20 years of expertise in leadership, organizational development, and performance improvement, Rob is renowned for his innovative, people-first approach. He specializes in creating human-centric, sustainable systems that drive growth and success. Thank you so much for being here, Rob. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I love your themes of human-centric, sustainable, people first when it comes to performance improvement. Can you tell us a little bit about your philosophy and how you approach these things?
Right. It's almost like I chose all the buzzwords, right, that are in industry right now, but apparently people aren't doing well. My approach is that we give the better parts of ourselves to work and to an employer. You know, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a solopreneur, it's okay. It's your job is, right? But our best time, our most productive times of the day are typically our waking hours when we're awake, and we're eating that up with workspace stuff, right? And so my belief is that, look, we have to spend time at this job, whatever it might be. How can we have a better experience? And actually, I approach it from the others way around. How can we as an organization bring the best out of the individuals that work with us to help bring them up, to even upskill them for life in general, to be more impactful and have greater levels of joy and satisfaction in not only their workplace, but in life in general. And so that's where my philosophy is rooted in. So what does that look like, and how do we do that? And it's a real uphill battle in many instances, because organizations are filled with people, and people are messy, right? In a really beautiful way. They just, from moment to moment, they could shift and change based on events and emotions that are occurring on within them or around them. Life happens. And so how can we be mindful? How can the organization or the system be mindful of those ebbs and flows of people, to be realistic in terms of what we expect out of our staff, but also to kind of get out in front of them and create the conditions for them to thrive, to be more successful? Because we often wait for people to speak up for themselves, but the challenge with people's opinions is that they don't necessarily know what they want, or they don't necessarily know what they're doing. And what I mean by this is that research demonstrates that there's not a clear line between intention and action, or ideation and action, or opinion and action. And part of this, in my opinion, not found in that research, but part of it in general, is if we asked our staff, what do you need more of? They really don't know, to some extent, right? Because they are at the limits of their language. And so let me give you an example. I've worked with organizations in the past, and we partner with these organizations to do great stuff for their people. Every once in a while, an organization will say, well, let's survey the people to see what they want, for whether it's a development session, an initiative, stuff like that. And I said, okay, if you want to do that, go for it. Let's create a big, broad survey. So we give them lots of ideas of options, because even what they might say they want might not actually truly be what it is that they're kind of calling for. for example. And, and a great example is like recognition. When we see feedback surveys and things that say, I need more recognition, I don't get enough recognition at work, I really pause when I hear that, because to me, that's a reflection of their language. It's not so much a reflection of what's going on. And I think what typically is going on, and this is the case, what we see with most organizations, that is a symptom of low psychological safety, but they don't know that word yet necessarily, or they don't know how to articulate how that's impacting them or how they feel. They just know that they don't feel like they're being respected or given the time of day. So trying to work through this to help, my goal at the end of the day is people go home at the end of the day with their fuel tank, their internal fuel tank, whatever their energy reservoir is, adequately full to be present with the people and things they want to be present with after work. Because they still have some time left in the day to be awake, alert, and engaged. But if we leave them kind of worn down at the end of the day, that none of that's going to happen. And then they're not the best version of themselves for their family and friends. So it's a big picture piece that starts in the workplace, in my opinion.
Yeah, we work to live, not live to work. So, we're spending so much time at work, and to not have to be developed or valued by our employer, like we'll apply for jobs that we've been trained for that we're not necessarily passionate about, we may or may not be. And then we spend all this time doing the tasks that are there, and we don't necessarily feel like our opinion would be wanted, let alone if we're actually hiding what we truly are and what we're truly passionate about so that we can just fit into this job description. We're not going to tell what we really think, what we really want.
Right.
It becomes
let's be honest. Life is complicated enough outside of work, right? And that's just another level of complication that's stacked onto it. And to your point, yeah, we're not going to share all of our secrets and concerns and stuff because we're not sure someone will actually hear us for what we're saying, as opposed to, all of a sudden their nose gets bent out of joint and then all of a sudden they're against you afterwards, right? So it's just not a safe space to do that, some of those things.
Yeah. And, the more that we fit ourselves into a box, in a job description that we're not really passionate about, the more we cut ourselves off from what we really desire and who we really are. So we'll have a much harder time expressing or even knowing what we want, right? So when organizations figure out that they have this problem, like how do they figure out that they need someone like you to come in and be more people-centric? Like, what are the things going on in the workplace that they're noticing that aren't working?
So I want to make it clear that my belief is that we could have high performance and high quality work experiences simultaneously, that there's not one at the expense of others. And sometimes over the years, people prioritize the people more than the objectives of the organization, and that doesn't reflect well. So when we have these conversations, it's really important for me to be mindful that someone might have already prioritized the people, but they got even less work done, or it actually created a new problem, right? So for me, it really, let's look at it in terms of organizational performance. Are you hitting your marks consistently and to the level you want to hit them? Let's start there, and then we backwards break it out from there. Because if you're not hitting those marks, there's often a lot to be said, and we could trace this back to the behavior of people in the workplace. And a lot of it can stem from lack of accountability and lack of difficult conversations, low value feedback, if you even give feedback. So we could track this stuff back. And I'm not saying culture. I'm saying let's treat people well, give them structure, and that structure, and with compassion, starts to take care of itself. And it creates this environment where we could have higher quality conversations, more likely to have feedback and open-mindedness. We can nurture this culture of curiosity. So, but all of those things are tied to performance outcomes. They really are. Because if you can't be curious in your workplace, then you don't challenge assumptions and beliefs, right? And then you don't necessarily make changes in practices and processes. And so it's easy to see how things stagnate when we we don't we don't give it a certain level of attention and care in terms of how are the people players, both individually to themselves as well as to their colleagues, working and existing, and what's that relationship to that outcome that we're not hitting right now. And so like I said, I would start, there's a number of things you could look for. If you don't like the sound or the feel of the culture when you're in the space, that's a really clear telltale sign, because I bet if you don't like that, there's a good chance that you're also not seeing the performance where you want it. But even if you take that element of observation out of there, let's just look at your performance objectives for this company, for this organization, and how are we doing at it? And isn't it reasonable to think that we could be doing better if we enhanced our processes, if we enhanced our practices? And that's where I would start, is actually looking at where the organization's not hitting its marks. Because not everyone needs the same solutions. Some people might just need some work with having some difficult conversations because they already have great relationships and the culture's doing great things. But for other organizations, it starts as early as hiring or even before hiring and structuring that well, so we're bringing in better quality talent to help us accomplish what it is we want to do. And so there's a variety of different factors. And so when we work with groups, it's based on their factors. It's not based on just cookie cutter approach, right? I was having a conversation with a company this morning, and they said, well, if we give you this data that we have, can you run with it and follow the data and build things according to the data that they want to make improvements on? I said, yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we do. And that's what we like to do, because they said, because we've worked with other groups and they kind of scrap the data and just do what they want to do. And that is not my objective as an organization. I'm not serving my clients well if I'm just doing what I want to do. Because let's be honest, when we develop something and we learn something and we're consultants in something, sometimes we're pretty myopic. And it doesn't mean necessarily even it's a great practice, but it might be all we know. So that's what we're wedded to. And so I like to reflect that we have a wide enough book of business as well as suite of services and practices that you and I can have a conversation, and we could quickly begin to recognize what it is that you want and need, so that what we're building together based on your wants and needs. And if I can just add this, typically what happens with our clients, we're over 90% referral base. They say, hey, Rob, can you do, or can Angie come do what my friend saw Angie do at their organization, right? And into the audience, Angie's my wife and my business partner, right? And you know her also. And
Yeah.
so, and that's typically how it works. They're like, hey, we want Angie or Rob to come in and do what they did for this other group we heard about. I said, hey, we're happy to have that conversation and do that for you. I said, but can we take half an hour, 45 minutes just to visit and chat about, why do you think this would be the solution? What do you need? What are your pain points? And what we do in that 45 minutes is really, it helps me understand, say you're the client, what's going through your world right now? Where are those pain points? What are your hopes and ambitions? What are your stress that you're carrying as the leader? And that helps me get a better picture of what your organization's facing and is about. So then we could say, look, Angie will absolutely do that and it'll be a great fit. Or we could do that if you truly want to, but let me give you a little bit of feedback of what I'm hearing here. And let me explain to you why I think this other option might be a better path forward, right? And so it's one of those things, because at the end of the day, it's your culture that matters, good or bad. And that's the variable that we have to work with to make the improvements and the enhancements we want in the organization. Like I said, it doesn't matter if it's what I want or what I believe. It has to really come back to who you are as an organization and a team. And how do I embrace that? And how do we systematically kind of attack what needs to be attacked to create the outcomes you want to see?
Yeah. And as the coach or consultant, it's easy for you to probably even pick up on body language. Like you walk into an organization and there's an energy before anything's even said. And you can see all kinds of things that need to change before they've even said it. And they're coming to you with words that are, I'm comparing myself to my friend who told me this really inspiring story, and it sounds like a beautiful solution, and I want that too. But those particular details are not really what's happening over here. So having that deeper conversation helps the client convince themselves about what you see that needs to be fixed, right?
Yeah, there's a couple things there that you mentioned. The first one is context. Context is super important. And what I mean by context is just because you read about whomever in a book and they said just do X, Y, and Z, and they had success, doesn't mean it's going to be remotely close to accurate for you. Like so, but we're creatures that like to mimic things. And so we like to see other success stories or other success practices and say, ooh, that worked well for that group. We need to do that here. The reality is that it's a different culture, it's a different system, it's a different profit model. It's all these variables are different. And the likelihood of that being successful here without a real careful integration and rollout is very low. Like you're throwing good money at bad solutions. So what is it going to look like here? I'd much rather you say, hey, Rob, this is what this group's doing, and here's what their outcomes are, and this is what they're accomplishing. Can you help us establish something like that here based on who we are? Absolutely. Super easy if that's the case. Doesn't work if it mimics it. The other thing to your point, leaders are often too close to the problems too, right? They're so, and I don't mean this negative because I'm just as much guilty of this. We're so emotional, like in the sense of we're emotional beings, and things that are in our environment, especially our close environment, hit us all different ways with respect to emotions. And so when someone's either disappoints me or annoys me, I'm processing that emotion and I'm thinking about what I'm feeling, and I build levels of judgment and resentment of that other person without actually knowing the why behind what is it that they did that led to this mistake or disaster or whatever. And because there's a lot more to be said about what is it that led to that than just that my visceral reaction to that other person.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you have mentioned that this can often be an uphill battle. And we've got a lot of leaders who approach management and leadership with a command control approach. So those leaders may not be the types that are looking for what you do, right? Because they're too proud to admit that anything's going wrong.
Yeah, there's a lot out there, and they exist, and we've worked with them, and we haven't worked with them over the years. But here's my favorite person. They're expert in their craft. It doesn't matter. Engineering, nonprofit, whatever, manufacturing. They're that expert. But they say, hey, Rob, I need your help with the rest of this stuff. I know what I've done in my past, and I know what I've seen in my past. And let's be honest, most of us learn leadership through osmosis, in the sense of we watch other people do good things and we watch other people do bad things, and we try to make mental notes never to replicate the bad things and only do the good things. And sometimes we do both, and it's all over the place. And so those people that are like, look, we want to partner with you. I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. They're being vulnerable to me. It's perfect. I love it because we just have good conversations. We lean in. We cut to the chase, right? You're not walking on eggshells around egos and pieces like that. And then as they build trust, they start to really value your perspective as the expert, right? Because there's always a level of hesitancy. Does this person really know more than me? Or, are they really an expert? But over time, we grow through that. One of my things that I talk to my clients about, I don't want them to get too ahead of themselves at time. And so one of the things we talk about is hiring and staffing and what's your strategies around these pieces. And they're like, oh, I think we're good. We're good in this area right now. I say, and because I have the rapport with them, I say this with other non-clients too, but they never call me back. I say, look, you're just one bad hire away from a problem. And what I mean by that, and my clients know what I mean by that. They know that what they're doing is working, but maybe there's room for further enhancement because the dynamics of a team are complex. And just as you know, you get the right team together, it doesn't matter how good or bad that leader is. They connect, they do good things together, right? And my worry is that too many leaders look at their team and think, look, I'm the leader and there's a reason why we're doing things so well. And it's just people have good synergy, right? And like I said, one bad hire. So one person leaves, new person comes in, and it can fall apart in within a week. And that's what I don't want people to do is experience that. I want them to future proof their teams and their organization. Put the work in while you have the time to build the capacity so that when these curveballs come, you know how to respond to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I mean, this kind of parallels parenting, right? Like
Yeah,
actually communicating and listening and allowing people to have feedback. Like if you approach parenting with you do as I say and you don't question me and you do it now, like
right.
would you ever talk to your staff that way? I hope not. Um,
But I think you're right there, right? That there's a parallel here. Because once again, let's do leadership and parenting side by side. When did we ever get development in either of those things for the most part, right? How did we really learn? Both through osmosis, both
osmosis.
through observation, right? And feelings and reactions. And then, as you mentioned, some leaders are more commanding and dictatorial. Same thing with parents, right? And then some parents are totally absent and unengaged and uninterested. Same thing about some leaders, right? And I think it's true that the best parents and the best leaders are aware, concerned, and responsive. And but the thing is, like I mentioned, we don't come across this naturally. It takes time to learn these things. And hopefully we take some classes and we learn some stuff and read a book. But even though we've read books, taken classes, like look at the book industry is a racket in the sense of people are reading books, reading books, reading books, and the conversion between their new knowledge and actual practice, I suspect, is negligible, right? So just because
Yeah.
we think we're leaders, or just because we think we know something because we listen to podcasts doesn't mean we necessarily know how to translate that from knowledge into action.
Yeah, embodiment is a challenge, and coaches help us practice that. But
Yeah.
one of the things too that you don't just have your leadership style as the leader. Each person on your team has a way that they respond to different leadership styles. So for me, I grew up in a pretty command control environment, and I expected that. So if I had a boss that would talk to me and try to get my feedback and be calm and approach me in a more gentle, open way, I would be like, this person is being fake and manipulative. I don't trust them. I don't feel safe. Like, isn't that
Right.
interesting? Right? Because
It is, right?
everybody's got their different, we
Yeah.
think familiar is safe
Yeah.
instead of knowing what safe really is.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100% there.
Yeah, I had a boss where so at one of the companies I worked at, I was, I was a manager, so I was a controller. I had, I think, 6 people that reported to me, and I was changing things. And every single day at work, I was convinced I was going to get fired because I didn't keep my mouth shut. I didn't I just was like, we need to change this. Let's change this. And it wasn't really aggressive necessarily, but it was just like, this isn't working and here's the solution and let's do it. And they were like, okay, well, there's all these other people that are going to be affected and we've got to do these things slowly. Like this, I can see it's going to work. It's a really great idea, but we can't change everything at once. But I never ran out of things to say. And the funny thing is feeling like I'm going to be fired all the time. But I did have, apparently, my managers above me had created enough safety to allow me to push the boundary in my own mind. Like it was all in my mind that I was unsafe.
Right.
But that's the complexity of humans. Like the way that we all behave and relate to each other is totally unpredictable. So if, we're really reactive as a leader, when we have all these different dynamics, like all different adverse childhood experiences and
yeah, we're a product of our environment, right? Or I won't even say environment. We're a product of our inputs, the quality and nature of the inputs, not good or bad. Just we embody that, and all of us come from different experiences and different walks of lives and different situations. And I will not be the same person I am tomorrow as I am right this moment today. Something's going to change between now and then. And that's true for every single one of us, that we're constantly in this state of change, even if it's just as simple as aging, right? But if you could acknowledge that and then step back and think about that, and think about how every single person going through life is going through the exact same thing, but not through my thing. They're all going through their thing. We were watching a show on Netflix, and it was featuring an Asian family, and I said to my wife, I said, just think about, and because it was showing some of the strain between the mother and the sons that have moved on, and just what that familial group is. And I said, just think about the stress that mom's experiencing right now based on their path in life, based on what they've been taught are important lessons and important things, right? And then I stop and I think about my own life, and then I think about the good and the not so great things that our parents have done, in the sense of it's all been good, in the sense of it's out of the goodness of their heart they're trying to do these things. But it's now at the age I am, I sit back and I think, man, that language did not serve anyone well. And if anything, it's created shame or guilt or created distance between family members. But that's all they knew also, right? So I was thinking about this the other day. There was also, there's a commercial, and I can't remember what it's regarding. Maybe it was like an insurance commercial, and they're talking about how much they've saved. And it has now that they have ants in their house, and the joke is that their ants have moved in. And the one says, that's a lot of house for you guys. I hope you can stay on top of it. And I was like, even that in and of itself, I remember hearing that for the first time decades ago and thinking, there's some judgment in this thing. And then that's what led to this conversation that I think we need to be, we can't walk on eggshells, but we need to be mindful of what we say and how it affects others around us and what our true intention is behind that. And so anyways, kind of muddying the water here, but to the point that we're having conversation, people are complex and there's a lot going on. And so that one size fits all approach of leadership, of supervision doesn't serve people well. And we feel it. This is my big fear. We feel it in the systems. The leaders know where the problems are. They know where those pinch points are. They know where those bottlenecks are. But they're often not brave enough or courageous enough to address them. It's easier to keep cycling through people under that person as opposed to improving that. And then to what point is enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, when I hear that kind of a judgment, it makes me think of, it's coming from jealousy. When somebody's like, oh, that's a lot of house. You think like,
I wonder if she could say that without rolling her eyes, right?
Yeah. And a lot of the judgments that I have made, come from jealousy for sure, or some kind of fear of feeling of unsafety. And, we hear about our parents, their parents would say that us talking about our feelings and such a lot of fluffy hippie bullshit. And I think the truth is, yes, we have gotten to a point where we're more in the territory of thriving than they were. They were in so much survival mode that they didn't actually have the time and space to even think about how their behavior was affecting other people. So sure, we are privileged and we get to do that, but isn't that the point of society? Like when we talk about our parents and our grandparents and our trauma, it's not to bash them. It's the fact is we have recognized that, oh my gosh, we're in a place where we have a little more space to make more improvements. And there's nothing wrong with making more improvements and acknowledging that there's a better way to approach each other and treat each other and learning from past mistakes and implementing new strategies, right? It's not all about fluffy hippie complaining, that's not the aim, right?
Right. Well, it's like there's a continuum, right? And anyone that's at either end of the continuum's extreme, right? Whether that was back then or now, right? And so we need to be careful that we don't take ourselves a little too seriously. And one of the jokes Angie and I have had over the years is just this concept of the more we've learned, the more we can articulate ourselves, the more difficult it's become to resolve some conflicts because, well, my feelings matter. Well, so do my feelings matter. Well, what you're saying, you know what I mean? Like, so you learn about all these tools and frameworks, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, we're not any better off now because we're not, it's just a different type of conflict or difference. And so it's just, we have to be careful that it doesn't get the best of us because we can become pushovers or we can be too brazen or, you know what I mean? Like there's that spot in the middle. And that's where I really believe in like the situational nature of the person and responding to, like, I'll respond to you different than I respond to Angie, different than I respond to my oldest. You know what I mean? Like, and really value you for who you are and be with you when we're having this conversation and then be with them when I'm having that conversation. And that was the same way I tried to do when I was leading stabs and people, was try to role model that. And that's a little kind of easy hint or tip. That's someone that can take, how can I be more alert and present with the person I'm with? Regardless, home or office. And if we practice it at home, it's more likely to occur at office. But in some instances, it's easier to do at the office because we seem to sometimes treat people in office better than we treat our other people in our life that are even more important to us. So, but if you never thought of it, how would you know that? So something for all of us to journal about tonight.
Yeah, there is this phenomenon where when families kind of separated and lived less tribal and they're all behind closed doors and four walls and it's just the immediate family, there's a lot of abuse that goes on that doesn't get spoken about. Like people take out their anger on these people and there's secretism, and that's being talked about more now where it's coming out. It's part of the awareness, but it is interesting how that happens, how we can be one way at the office and then come home and either take the anger out on the people who are there, and everybody does it, kids, parents, we're all doing it to each other,
pecking order,
or we're completely numb and I'm too tired to deal with any of this. I exhausted myself at work. I gave all my energy there and I'm not going to be present with you guys because making the money is more important. That's how we survive. And that's a way of,
you have all this because I've done this, right?
Yeah. And so I don't owe you anymore.
Yeah.
I don't owe you my time and presence.
The life outside of work, and this isn't my area of expertise, but it totally resonates with me that is such an important area and aspect of our life, and that what happens outside of work flows into work. And just as what happens in work flows out of work. But what we know from some of the research is that we can't have well-being at work and transfer it home. It doesn't really slide that way well. But we can have well-being at home and transfer that into the workplace. And so that's something that we should be mindful of, because there's a relationship that has to happen there. And to your point, right, that what we talked about the energy and I busted my butt and have nothing left at the end of the day, that's not serving anyone well. And if that's what you want in life, then that's fine. You get to go down that path. But I think other people want more. They just don't know what they want yet. And I really believe organizations have obligations to help build better citizens. And I was doing a strategic planning session with a board once, and the CEO after the course of the weekend said, "Whoa, what I just realized as we wrap this all up is that we've spent so much time preparing our people to do their jobs in terms of tasks, in terms of functions. We haven't prepared them with the human skills to be more impactful and effective once they have that task knowledge, that task expertise, and that we need to find a balance between not just preparing someone to be competent in their job, but to be competent as it relates to interactions and situations around their job so that they're corporate citizens, so that they're citizens of this team, that they're community members of this team, right? And then that goes and follows them home, and hopefully they can have better quality conversations and do a better job role modeling good behavior for their children, and start to change cycles over time through this real purposeful design based around care from the organization. Like, I think if we really started to invest a little bit more in that in terms of social capital, um, I think we'll see some really good things down the road as it relates to our communities and stuff outside of work because of the good work being done at work.
Yeah. If you don't know the why behind all these tasks you're doing, if you don't know how it trickles down and affects all the other people in the organization, all the stakeholders, not just the people in the organization, but the customers and the clients and uh, it all flows outward beyond. So task teaching, it's like, how long is a person going to repeat a task over and over? How many years are they going to stay if they have no idea why they're doing it, how it affects the other people, how to communicate with those people? Like, they should have the opportunity to communicate with the people and find out how their work is affecting those people so that they can be a community member. And it just expands it and makes it a whole life experience rather than a robotic experience.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, doing tasks, it's not anything anybody's going to stick around long term for.
Well, what's interesting is that what is happiness to people, right? And I've always thought this is a very interesting question, because what makes you happy is different than what makes me happy, most likely. And then how our expectations are tied to that. And so for some people, doing monotonous work with no why to some extent is enough. But it's also the way they view their world. It's the way they process the experience. It directly reinforces some of their desires after work, kind of thing. And so this is I think an important concept that we need to be mindful of. And I think this is where, like, you think about relationships with people you've dated over the years and stuff like that, as you start to build towards trying to have these lifelong relationships, and even friends. People want different things, right? Think about your best friends, regardless of the quality of, like, if they're your significant other or not. Your best friends, you resonate, right? You align, you have similarities. Think about the people you don't want to be around, right? It's because of incongruency, or you don't agree and stuff like that. And our workplace is filled with communities of members that are all random from all sorts of perspectives and walks of life. And this is another thing that becomes a challenge with culture work is so sometimes people think, well, maybe we should just have mandatory fun time, like, or and my reaction to that is that might be what some people want, but that might drive other people further away. And so it's finding that middle ground of all of this as it relates to your kind of end goals, to make sure that you're providing an experience that meets people's needs. I remember one of my clients was telling me they would do like once a month, last Friday of the month, socials in a break room, and and not everyone would come. But there was one person who would never come that really took it seriously, that he was in charge of picking up the drinks or whatever. And that was his aspect of contribution to the experience. It totally fulfilled him. It met his needs and expectations. But he didn't want to be there rubbing elbows and socializing with other people. He just wanted to create the conditions for that to happen, which is awesome. So he had a role. And but when we say, hey, look, you have to do this or you have to do that, we would have lost him.
Yeah, that's true. It's funny because in my human design, it's like I have a lot of high expectations about having depth in relationship and really, and there are people that don't appreciate that empathic approach, and they don't want to talk about what's really going on with them, and they don't want to, and then you mentioned maybe the person whose goal is just to provide the value by doing the work, and then they come home and they kind of shut down. And to me, the person who does that, because I've been that person and am now not, that was a conditioned response by osmosis. Like my dad prioritized making money. He was always in fear around it, like just like, oh my God, there's never going to be enough. And that changed as I got older. But when I was really young, that was where he was at. And so the family stuff was just like irritating for him at that time. And I kind of developed that sort of attitude when I had my family, because I, being the breadwinner, would be like, well, I'm doing very important things and you guys are not important. And it was really just a reenactment of what my dad was doing, because I didn't have any other point of reference. And so it's interesting to have the experience of self-exploration and making room for that in your life is pretty rewarding. And it's just fun to watch how you change. And if you find that you're behaving that way and you're not happy with the way it's happening, like if you feel like, I don't want to be around my kids, but I want that, like, then it's time to do a deep dive into, why do I behave this way?
So what you're talking about, I think, is super important. And disagree with me if you don't agree, but I suspect at some point you had to take some time. You had to slow it down and back away. And that's one of the challenges too, is that people go, distract. You know what I mean? Like whatever you want to use as the excuse, but even organizations are the same thing. Oh, we can't afford to take time off to do a retreat, or we can't afford to take time off to do a session, or we can't afford this. Or like I remember I had one client that said, well, I could give you 90 minutes. And I said, well, I need 8 hours. And they said, well, how about 2 hours? I said, I could do it in 6 to 8. And then eventually we had a conversation, and they understood where I was coming from. And part of it's probably from their past, that someone didn't make good use of their time also. But we can't afford not to take time. We can't afford not to step away and go sit somewhere quietly and reflect, right? We can't afford not to giving our teams space to kind of get off task for a bit, connect, and then just reflect upon what it is they're working on, and could it be done better, things like that. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because to me, time is that resource that will get away from us. But what are we in a rush for? Can we slow it down, to pause, to reflect, to process, and then maybe set a better course that actually better utilizes our time moving forward?
Yeah, I love that. I can be very overstimulated. I can get into a habit of taking in information. And now I notice when I'm doing that, I'm trying to run away from some kind of feeling that I don't want to feel. And so like, I will drive myself crazy if I don't put the phone away, shut it off, turn everything off, have some quiet time, because we do need to get to know ourselves and what our particular needs are, right? I see so many people unable to shut that thing off. Like it's usually the phone now. Like I can see them in anxiety and they're just turn it on, just keep the noise going because I can't. And it's like,
Yeah.
nah,
Distraction
actually, you
stimulation.
just need
Yeah.
to sit with your feelings and feel them and actually let yourself run the mental tape that wants to be run and let it
Yeah.
go. And
Yeah, get off that dopamine treadmill, right? And have some time. Yeah, you're right. But for some people it's very challenging. I know for myself, and I've changed a lot over time. So you see the background of my picture, and we already chatted that like this is where I will be next week essentially. Like I will be unplugging. The world's not going to know where I am. And but I haven't always been like that. And that's been in the last 8 years. It's been a shift. I used to go, 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 not slow down. But I just need this time to step away. And that to me has been my form of self-care because I know that when I'm in this state of balance, I'm a better version of myself for everyone. And actually,
absolutely.
unfortunately, I'm not in that season right now. Like this is a grind season as a consultant. Next week's going to be an unplugged vacation. But for the most part, for the next 3 months, uh, I have to know my cycles and schedules so that I can build in that time to do exactly what we're talking about here, so that I continue to kind of live the lifestyle and embody the practice that I try to encourage people that are clients, friends, whatever, to follow their version of it, of course.
Yeah. But I mean, have you noticed a difference in your physical health
Oh yeah.
8 years ago versus
Oh
now that you're
yeah,
aware of taking the time? And
absolutely. Yeah, so different. So different.
yeah, there's a lot more.
And just smiling and present, and the phone doesn't matter, right? Like there's all these, think about all those things that have been all of our own individual distractions. And then once you go through this experience, what you realize is none of that stuff truly matters, because if anyone really, really, really needed me, they would get me, they'd find me, they know where I am. And for most things, right? Remember, we never had these things growing up. So everything worked out just fine back then.
Yeah. And we can be, I noticed this in myself yesterday when I'm putting out offers and I'm doing marketing. I will obsessively check my social media notifications to see if anybody is responding and make sure I get right back
Views
to
or
them.
likes.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I've given instructions on how to find me. I don't, if if they're meant to find me, they're going to find me. I don't need to, like, I can turn those little bubbles off. I don't actually need them.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not really tied to any truth, right?
Right. Yeah, they're not. I mean, it's also funny too, though, that I can see social media and advertising and stuff is because it's virtual, it's not in person, um, as those are not real people. Like we hear about the scammers on the internet, and we hear about, so it's like at some point when you're going through a growth stage, when you're building your own business, like you're going to have to stop with the people pleasing and perfectionism and immediate response stuff, because you won't have the capacity to do the things that really matter if you are in those energies, because it takes all of your focus. Like,
Yeah. 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 Have you looked at your LinkedIn today, and you get another B2B sales pipeline? You know what I mean? Like it's just, oh my gosh. But at the same time, it's necessary evil, right? So as for us personally, um, we don't use any social except for LinkedIn for the most part. Angie does a bit with her podcast in terms of some other channels, but that's not where we're looking. We're not prospecting. People that are buying our services are not shopping on Facebook. And so if that's true, then what's the other value Facebook or any of these other platforms are bringing to me? Not a whole lot. In fact, they make me feel less, right? So anyways, but it's a necessary evil to some extent to have. As an
Yeah.
entrepreneur, you have to have your presence and you have to play the game to some extent.
Yeah. And, I would say there are scammers and but there's a lot of times, people are messaging you and friend requesting you to sell you something and you're trying to sell them something. And then
Yeah.
they act like they're trying to be friends, but really they're just trying to get friendly until they can sell you something or
Yeah.
start dating you or scam
Yeah.
money out. Like, don't bother with all those conversations. Like, if it's at that
Yeah.
point, it's time to hire a virtual assistant to filter all that stuff
Yeah.
out.
I got an idea. We could both do this. We could, when they approach us, agree to sign up for whatever their lead gen or whatever if they sign up for our retreat.
There we go.
I think that's a fair trade-off, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone in town wants me to buy a car from them, but they don't want to use our services. I think that's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. It's a challenge. It takes a lot of time, and that's another reason why we've got to take that time to unplug. And I'm excited for you for your trip coming up. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Looking forward to it.
Well, how do people find you? I mean, you mentioned LinkedIn, but tell us all the.
So LinkedIn is probably one of the easiest things. And first name, as you mentioned, Rob. Last name is spelled like lion. It's Lion, but as you correctly mentioned, it's Leon. Long story to that. And so just do a search for me and I should come up pretty quickly. And if you want to look at our website or find me that way, our company is Black River Performance Management. And our website, our URL is Black River, then the letter P for performance, the letter M for management.com. And you'll get an overview of our consulting training. You go to my profile page, you will see, or they will find our conversation when it's published, and they'll be pipelined into there, and resources and blogs and things like that. So, but we love working with different groups. We work with people all over the world. We are industry agnostic, context specific. So we focus on humans and human environments. And so that's what we love to do. And as long as it keeps being fun, we'll keep doing it.
Oh, I love that. And then we talked about this before, but one more time, what are some key indicators that an organization or an individual will see when they are in need of your services?
When they're not hitting their performance marks, whether that is the published performance marks that they've committed to, say a strategic plan or revenue targets, or some other things where they just feel like we're not servicing enough. We might not collect the data because a lot of organizations don't collect necessarily the right data to support some of the stuff, but they know they're not where they want to be, or they believe they have the capacity to be further ahead. Oftentimes it's not a reflection of the system, it's a reflection of the players in the system. I was having this conversation earlier today that, for most clients, 80% of what they're doing is right on target with who they are and what they are. It's how do we enhance the efficiencies within that with the people so that we take that a little bit further and to be more successful. So, and from that, we're happy to help. We're happy to have conversations. First person to tell you that I can't help you. It's not in my wheelhouse if we do have a conversation, but we do quite a bit from assisting people with strategic hiring to strategic planning facilitations, facilitating retreats. We've done retreats out of country, executive retreats, CEO retreats. We have a wide range of services, but like I said, I'm very happy and comfortable saying, look, I can't help you with this. Here's someone else that I think can do this better for you.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, have a great trip next week and a great rest of your day.
Thank you.